Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I am going to start this video with a minor mail haul for a person who said that he is trying to read what he owns. I've sure been getting a lot of books in. This is not a case of having been hacked. They wrapped it in newspaper, which is nice. What paper is this? Whoops. The New Haven Register, so that might be important. And the book is in good shape, I think. Decent shape. Yeah, very decent shape. Oh, this is lovely. This is just everything I could have hoped for. It is Writing and Authority in Early China by Mark Edward Lewis. Spine looks like it's a little broken, doesn't it? Yeah, that's no good. Well, it's got a crease, but it's not actually broken, I don't think, so I'll have to remember to be careful with it if I ever get there. But it's a clean copy. State University of New York Press. Very nicely, they put some actual characters in. Some of it is transliterated, some of it is actual characters, so that bodes well. I may have spoken a little bit about Mark Edward Lewis here and there. I don't know if when I did a 10 historians with brilliant prose or something like that video a while back, and Mark Edward Lewis was one of the authors I included. I had not read that much by him at the time. When I was a young man, my curiosity ranged in all sorts of different directions, and I wanted to learn about the world. And people nowadays will not realize, well, there was a good side and a bad side to things about the old world. You didn't have a lot of easy access to information. So, for example, as a generalist, I was curious to find out about Africa. This was the only book that I could find anywhere. I bought it and read it, but a little book like this, covering an entire continent, that's biting off more than one could chew as an author, I think, or even two authors. So this, and then I found the books by Basil Davidson and read most of those, I think. But that was really slim pickings, not a lot of variety. I've mentioned that for China, my earliest author was K.C. Chang. This is his book about Shang civilization. I forget the title of the book that I originally found by him. Myths, something, something. Myths, something, culture. But there wasn't a lot available at the stores at some point, and this is one of the oldest books pertaining to China on my shelves. I picked this up, Archaeology, and I've read some of it, but it was not particularly easygoing for me. I mentioned that I plan to read possibly these two, the Eastern, I don't know if you can see it. Well, let's give it to you up close. I plan possibly to be reading these for Historathon in January, February, March. But I thought maybe I should start with the archaeology, even though I've read some of it. The archaeology of old China is full of exciting vignettes. Of course, one thing that argues against reading these old books is that archaeology has continued apace, and so there are a lot of new discoveries all the time. And so for this sort of thing, one is best with newer information. that said, I always feel a loyalty to authors that I have read and liked. So I feel that since this book has been on my shelf probably for 30, 40 years, that I should really give it a go. I've recently been reading this book, not in this translation, but I like this author. And while I was looking for this set of books, I came across a book written by the translator called The Taiping Ideology. I didn't even know that I had this book, and it has nothing to do with the topic of today's video insofar as I ever have a dedicated topic, but because I happened to find it and didn't realize that I had it, I thought I would bring it out. It's a very highly regarded book, so maybe one day I will get there. I like the author's writing. I've decided that I don't think his translation is as good as it could be. I think he was probably the earliest translator of this book, so I'm reading a translation which has made use of his work, but is a little bit more precise, I think. Precise and less flowery. But so when I was young, I happened to go into Crocs and Brentanos and found this book, Sanctioned Violence in Early China. Of course, what more could one want to learn about China than it's the use of sanctioned violence? So I got the book and read it. I've read it twice, actually. It's not a particularly easy book. So I don't know if when I did that video about the 10 historians with stellar prose, if I read something from this or from one of the other books. So it's a book that would be worth going back to at some point. It has meant a lot, but it's a very narrow focus for a book. And I'm trying to address people who would like to learn something about ancient China and don't know exactly where to turn. Well, ancient and all the way through. I am not in any way, shape, or form a sinologist, or is it senologist? Senileologist. I know very little about the history of China, and so while I am on this BookTube channel, it's coinciding with a period of me trying to find out more. And the best thing that I have come across so far is 3 books, part of the Harvard Imperial China series. 3 books written by Mark Edward Lewis. So the first one, I've shown these umpteen times lately, deals with the Qin and the Han. The second one deals with China between empires. And the third one, China's cosmopolitan empire. So all 3 of them happen to be written by Mark Edward Lewis. And the series continues on with 3 more books. China's last, The Age of Confucian Rule, The Troubled Empire, and China's Last Empire, all by different authors. And I hope to get there soon. If you saw that other video, you saw that I'm planning to go delve back further into pre-Imperial China for some of these books before I continue onward with that series. I will just show you some other books which are sitting here, though, first. This book looks like it was probably very good in its day, Ancient China in Transition. I haven't read it. I don't know why or how I picked it up. It looks good, but I think it's from, I love the fact that they actually reproduce the characters. The Harvard series cheapened out, and so everything that you see there has been transliterated into pinyin. So you have to figure out what Chinese character is meant. It's generally not been a problem for me when I've needed to know. And for the most part, I haven't needed to know. But I do prefer old books that used to give you that. Now, this doesn't have much in the text that I can see. Yeah, this is all transliterated. Obviously, in the old days, it was probably prohibitively expensive to put it in. Now it would not be, but still, I'm sure presents other challenges to the person at the keyboard who is trying to format the book. But it looks like it might be a good book for me to go back to, but I think it's from 1965, and it is the type of thing that, aside from its bad smell, oh my God, you just don't know. The chicken is going to run off soon. I brought the chicken over from our Christmas display. You might think it's just a dog toy or something like that, but no, he is part of our Christmas menagerie. We have a couple of snow people, I guess would be the right way to say it, unless they want to refer to themselves as something else. Persons of ice, maybe. So he is over there with them, but I brought him here today to be a guest host in my video. Now this one, I don't know when or why I picked it up. Li Chi sounds familiar, so I bet. Things are falling. No, that's a different Li. So I don't know who this is. Pardon me, I shouldn't turn my back to the camera. I don't know who this is or why I have it, but it looks pretty good. The type is fairly large, so I think I should be able to get through it pretty soon. It's very much archaeological with this kind of thing, but it's one man's lectures, and that is of interest automatically. Let's see what the 3 lectures illustrated with finds at Anyang. So that's an early archaeological site. I can't see any chapter titles. So we've got Digging Up China's Past, Origin and Early Development, and then the Bronze Age of China. I probably should put that in with my January reads. It's as I say, the stories about finding this old stuff, finding the tortoise shells or what have you. It's it's all very interesting. I've read little bits here and there. But back in the day, wanting to find out about China, there weren't a lot of options, and when used books on the internet started to become available, after some research, I found that there were a couple of big books that were highly regarded. So there was China's Imperial Past, and then a book that was translated from the French, A History of Chinese Civilization. And now mind you, back in those days, I was not a strong reader. I'm not super strong anymore either, but I've gotten better. But neither of these books appealed to me, so they've just been sitting buried away, and I came across them recently while I was pulling out books for another video, so I thought, well, I should pull them out and show you. So very highly regarded in their day, but it's, again, a case where you might want something more recent. At least I certainly do. Not so much that the history is much more well-known, though it is, but because the questions that we ask are different to the questions that historians back then were asking. I'm reading Gary Wills about Henry Adams, the historian, and he is constantly making reference to the new style of history initiated by the Boston historians as bottom-up history. And I suppose as a shorthand, you could say that our concerns now are more with broader trends with the masses and less with the foibles of emperors and their most highly designated clowns, if you will. So emperors and clowns, big name clowns, are not where our interests are now. Now, these are a couple of books which I bought this because I was very interested in the topic here and tried to read it and couldn't get into it at all. It is Cambridge, and Cambridge really does a nice job on things. They're not as cheap as Harvard, and so you can see that the characters in here are there's a lot of Chinese characters in here, which my level is not to a degree where I would be likely to get any any benefit out of seeing the actual Chinese character, but still I think it's helpful. And I found this miraculously also by the same author. I had no idea that I even had this, but it would probably be a good thing to check into for the period of the title, Early China. And so after I read these, I may take another look at it. Possibly what bothered me about his writing style was something that can be overcome just with a greater familiarity with the topic. So there's that. Now, these three books by Mark Edward Lewis are all kind of along the same format. You will not find a narrative history here. So if that's what you're looking for, you will walk away from these books very disappointed. And all of them are drawn up along pretty similar lines. So this one has 10 chapters, I believe they all do, with the geography of empire, a state organized for war, the paradoxes of empire, imperial cities, rural society, the outer world, kinship, religion, literature, and law. So he divides his story into those topical parts, but you do get a little bit of narrative structure, which seems to flow nicely from one section to the other. So that was the first book. The second book, I'll just read you these because you'll see they're pretty similar. So it starts again with geography, the geography of empire, from foundation to rebellion, warlords and monopolists, urban life, rural society, the outer world, kinship, religion, writing, and then conclusion. They all have a concluding chapter. So, and the third one, the geography of North and South China, the rise of the great, this is the second one, sorry. The rise of the great families, military dynasticism, urban transformation, rural life, China and the outer world, redefining kinship, Taoism and Buddhism, writing, and conclusion. So he begins each book with a discussion of the geography, which does change over time because canals are built for example, which transform the economic structure of the country. He generally will have a chapter pertaining to the development of urban life. He will have a chapter about rural life. He will have a chapter dealing with China in context of the international world, so foreign affairs. And then these last chapters here, he has Taoism and Buddhism because they were just coming in at this time in the Tang Dynasty. He also treats of them, but they are really getting a much more secure footing in the culture. And then writing, and he will give you a little bit of literature. Any of these topics is worthy of a book on its own, or many books on their own. But I have found that these 3 books have given me the start of an overview of China, such as I never have had. And I speak as a person who has been on the outskirts of China and Chinese things for most of my adult life. So I've been aware of China, but I've never had any instruction, and I was never able to find a book that I could make it through. And I should say that this book, it starts with the empires, so you have history of China that predates this, but starting with the Qin and the Han dynasty are it's a good place really to start, because then you can look forward and you can look backward. So I think this Harvard series promises to be excellent. The first 3 books, I will vouch, are excellent, but the first time that I read this, I was a very weak reader at the time, and I don't know how many years ago it was now that I did, but I just could not get through it. I did pretty well. I think I got a couple of 100 pages, and then just trying to hold everything in place was hard. So even still, the geography of it is somewhat difficult, but I am helped nowadays because one can go and find a map online, that sort of thing, which in the old days you couldn't. So this whole series, as soon as it came out and I found out about it, I got all these books. I think you would have to pay more for them now. I got these all used, of course, and they were not at the prices they are now. But I know the paperbacks had not come out as yet. So if one is curious to find out about China, obviously one could start here with the first book. And if Lewis's style sits well with you, then proceed step by step. I don't know about the further books in the series by Kuhn, Brooks, and Rowe. So Timothy Brooke is the editor of the general series, so I have good hopes for that. Now, over the years, I've been aware, even before these came out, that Mark Edward Lewis had other books about China, and I check in periodically, and mostly they are outside of my reach, price-wise. This one was one of the cheaper ones. It cost me, I think, something like $20, and I had some credits, so it was a little bit less than that. And you wonder why I am buying it when I said I'm trying to read what you own more or less. I have not made any commitment to that. But that is because if I have an author that I know I love and I know I learn from, then I do not restrict myself in buying books by that author. And I did not permit myself to buy any of his books while these 3 were unread. So having read those three and found them to be as good as I hoped they would be, the first thing I did next was to run out and buy this. So starting with Sanctioned Violence in Early China, I think Writing and Authority in Early China will have some overlap. It's a bigger book and a more recent book, and so I am very curious to see how his thoughts have developed. I'm looking for the copyright page, which I don't see. Copyright, okay, 1999. So let's see when this one was. $1990. So there's almost a decade between them. And I would have bought this in and about 1990 because, as I say, it was just in Crocs and Brentanos. You could find such things in your local bookstore. Not even a great bookstore by any means, but people were reading things like that. So I thought that I would also show you the other books. Here's a cat, by the way. But to show you the type of titles that Mark Edward Lewis comes up with. This is The Construction of Space in Early China. So I think to get that is above my price point. I'm not saying it's $20, it's probably more like $40. And so I'm on a book-by-book basis with this author at this time. If I finish reading the book about writing and authority in early China, then I will consider going on to The Construction of Space, the flood myths of early China. It's not something that sounds like it would be of interest to me at all, but it is written by Mark Edward Lewis, and it is the one title out there which I think you can find for 20-something, which again is above my typical price point. I like to spend $5 with free shipping. But so if I read Writing and Authority in Early China, I may well go to the flood myths next. I think it's one of his more recent titles, or most recent perhaps, Honor and Shame in Early China. And I would love to read that one, but I think it's still in hardback, and I think it's $40, $50, something like that. So that would be a real extravagant. But the title right there is exactly in my interest range. So, and then also I have found there is a Cambridge Elements series, and he has a book for them titled Violence and the Rise of Centralized States in East Asia. And I would really like to see that because it sounds like it would add to his first book about sanctioned violence, but it would expand outward to other states in East Asia. So there it is. But this is a series of little short primers, I guess. And so I think the book is only about 65 or 70 pages. And it is available at the price of a full-length book. So I think the price is still in the 20s or 30s, something like that. And there is another book in that series set to come out by Lewis as well, Self and Body in Early Asian Thought. So here you see it. It's scheduled for release very soon, I think, sometime this month possibly. But the asking price for a 70-page book here is something like $65. So it's not something, I will probably never see those books, sadly. But the other ones that are out there on a book-by-book basis, I may well claw my way towards. So that is an overview of what little bit that I know about studying or trying to learn about ancient China in particular. But I do hope to keep progressing forward. As far as historical reading this year, I'm hoping to dedicate myself more largely to China than I have ever done, just because I have these books, and why not? So I want to thank everybody who has watched those couple of recent videos where I talked about China and given me encouraging words. This probably will be the last talking about China for a while that I do, unless I go into more specifics. But finding an author that you love is always critical toward any type of study. And I've never been an author who can pick out information from an author who I detest. In certain cases, like if you're doing heavy research about a topic, you have to do that. And that's a skill that I'm trying to develop as I improve bit by bit my reading ability. But I have certainly not gotten to that stage yet. So I've talked about all of these, and I will let you go. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.